Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor Chen.
No problem, yeah.
Let me start out by asking you, many people say that there is a new regulatory regime in Beijing today under Liu He and whoever will succeed to the governorship of the People's Bank of China. And this new regulatory thrust is going from being reactive to being proactive. Do you agree with those views?
I always thought that the regulators in China have been both proactive and reactive. I mean, it's not that they did not want to be proactive before. Rather, in many cases, it has been difficult to be proactive. If you look at fintech, new innovations here and there, it will be very difficult for the officials to know in advance what will happen and then act proactively accordingly, right?
Which is the greater danger, do you think, that they over-tighten and shut down a lot of fintech companies too precipitously and cut off lending to small businesses, or that they let these things go too far before they move against them? Both have their dangers. Which is the greater danger? Which do you worry about more at this time?
I think the tightening of the P2P and other internet-related financial transactions and businesses, the impact is relatively small because the total sum of all the P2P lendings may come to several tens or a few hundred billion renminbi. But that's a small percentage of all the bank loans and what China calls social financing. Over-tightening this space may actually hurt a lot of the small businesses and individuals, especially people in the countryside, because a lot of them benefit from such financial services that are not so provided by the bigger financial institutions.
I mean, some people worry about a miscalculation, and you let something go and then it has a contagion effect, and people don't differentiate and they panic. And obviously we saw that when the US regulators let Lehman Brothers go, and the contagion was horrendous. Do you worry about that kind of contagion arising from some miscalculation?
I do worry about this because a lot of the times the way finance works, right, is all based on expectations. I remember several years ago, right, the People's Bank of China experimented in the overnight market. They shut down some of the windows to create a very big overnight liquidity freeze.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, for quite a few days, the situation, the liquidity squeeze got worse and worse. I think in retrospect, if the People's Bank had continued with that experiment just a few days more, things could have gotten out of control. I think the more aggressive the current regulators in China try to tighten things up, the more likely that some triggering event could actually occur to start a snowballing process.
Deleverage is the sort of campaign slogan of the day, and it's kind of coalesced with the anti-corruption campaign. And yet, looking at the macro, the data is quite good. Foreign exchange reserves are building up again. you know, renminbi is stable, if anything, maybe trading on the strong side. The magnitude of the capital outflows has totally gone away. Is it time for China to start thinking about liberalizing once again? If you have so much money pent up in China, you'll see bubbles in the property market, you'll see stock prices, you'll see all these Ponzi schemes.
Yeah, I think I would go the other way around. You know, it's because the macro conditions have to be decent in order for the government to really be able to tighten credit supply and other leverage. Because once, like in 2018, once the macroeconomic conditions start going in the other direction, to be much looser money supply and loan supply and many other things. So that's one. Secondly, practically speaking, I just don't see how they can let capital outflow really be free. If the doors were opened up for people to move money out, many people would move money out very quickly. So that would just start, again, another snowballing process.
So, I mean, obviously this will not happen anytime soon. But if the authorities were to lift controls, and the backdrop is this volatile dollar, which had been weakening dramatically, where do you think the renminbi dollar would go? Where would that rate go if there were no controls suddenly?
For the last 2 years, the central bank was very nervous about the two big numbers, 3 trillion and the 7 renminbi for the US dollar to renminbi exchange rate. Their worry was that if these two hurdles would be passed at the same time, that would lead to a lot of panic selling of renminbi to get US dollars and other foreign currencies.
Final question for you. We have seen efforts, on the supply side to cut capacity. We've seen SOE reform. We've seen privately held companies with big wallets invest in SOEs, as Ali and Tencent did with Unicom. Will we see much more national service required of some of these wealthy private sector companies?
My reading of this is that it's really just a new way for the SOEs to still be larger and control more resources, more capital of the Chinese societies, so that the government, the state, would not have to add more capital to those SOEs, and at the same time the SOEs get to manage and control a much larger piece of the Chinese society's overall wealth and capital at the expense of private businesses having less access to capital.
So even as we talk about these private companies with 500 billion market caps, national service will be a requirement.
Private help, right? The state, the SOEs can do more now.
Very ironic, right? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.